So, going to Romans chapter 5, starting in verse 1, it says, "Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ." So, when we're justified by faith, we have peace with God. It says, "By whom also we have access by faith into this grace wherein we stand." So we have access into grace by faith. Faith gives us access into the grace of God. And we have access by faith into this grace when we stand and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. And then the next verse is what I'm getting to. It says, "And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience." Here we go again. This was in James chapter 1. Now it's in Romans chapter 5. Tribulation worketh patience. And patience, experience. So when you have tribulation and it works patience in you, now you have experience. Do you know that the person with the experience is never at the mercy of the person with the opinion? Right?
You're right.
So, person with an opinion can give a loud, long explanation of what he thinks it should be, but the person with the experience already knows. Right? So, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. How many of you recognize that hope is an important part of life? You recognize that? Did you do that teaching on hope? Hope and trust? I might fit that right in here. Can somebody get this for me? So, we've been working with people for about 25 years. And we find that people are very interesting. I have some mechanic friends, work on vehicles, work on cars and trucks and stuff like that. And they're actually pretty good at it. But they have one element that they have a disadvantage to that I have an advantage to. The people that I work with tell me what their problems are. The mechanic has to go find them. Do you know that people have problems? You're looking at me like you're not quite sure where I'm going with this. People have problems and they're happy to tell you about them. Did you know that? Until you start diagnosing them. Because the problem that is presenting itself is hardly ever the problem. The problem that is presenting itself is hardly ever the source or the root cause of what is going on. And so if you just go after the symptom, if you just go after whatever they're presenting, you tend to get frustrated. But when you look for what is behind that, what is the challenge behind that? There's this thing we've been getting some teachings on how to problem solve, and one of the things is what we call IDS. It's identify, discuss, and then solve. Most people try to solve first and then discuss and then identify. Okay, let me change that a little bit. Most men want to solve first, discuss if necessary, and what is identify?
And most women would discuss.
Most women want to discuss and discuss and discuss and discuss. Right? So do you see the problem here? If neither one of them are really identifying what the problem is. And so if you work on a problem and you stay with identify until you agree together this is the problem, then you can discuss it and solve it. But if you believe this is the problem, and he believes this is the problem, and she believes this is the problem, and two other people believe two other things are the problem, and you're trying to discuss it and solve it, you don't get very far. In fact, you just have heated discussions or make enemies. Right? But if you identify the problem, and then you start discussing that problem, then you're able to solve it. How did I get here? I was going somewhere. I was going to talk about hope. Yeah. I'm talking about how we identify where people are at. Okay? What we've found is that there are 5 basic areas that we're looking for in people's lives to identify where they need help in. And these are in order. The first one is hope. If a person doesn't have hope, and you don't start with hope, you're probably not going to get anywhere. And a lot of people, especially in the Amish and Mennonite background people, try to start with number 3. Number 3 is personal responsibility. Most people are just like, just get it together. Just do this. Just whatever, like man up and whatever. That works great if you have hope and trust. But if you don't have hope and trust is number 2 here. If you don't have hope and trust, personal responsibility doesn't work that great. Because there's missing ingredients. Do you know how to bake a cake? What would happen if you would just put flour in a pan and you would put water in and stir it around and put it in the oven? Huh? Gravy. Solid gravy. So not very good. And yet that is how some people like to or try to operate in life. They try to focus on the personal responsibility part. And if hope is not there and trust is not there, you're not going to bake that cake. I'm not saying it might be harder for you. I'm saying it won't happen. Okay, are you listening? If they don't have hope and they don't have trust, it's not going to happen. And so, if you find out, do they have hope? And then do they have trust? Are they willing to take personal responsibility? And then the next one is teamwork. Once you are able to take personal responsibility, now you can learn to operate as a team with other people. And then after teamwork is leadership. I find that there's a lot of people trying to operate in leadership without hope. You know what happens? You start getting dictatorship instead of leadership. You start getting angry, frustrated people who are trying to figure out why everybody else is doing it wrong, and it makes them look bad. If only all you would get it already, and I would look better. So pull up your boots and get it on already. Which doesn't work. And so then they get frustrated. They know they're not doing anything wrong. It's just got to be all the other people. I mean, if they would have been given some good people to lead, they could probably be successful.
And then you pounce on symptoms and start judging and creating a real mess.
Say more.
A symptom is something that looks like it could be the problem, but it's just a fruit of the problem. It's not the root of the problem. There's a lot of judging going on symptoms. There's a lot of people that believe that if you could change your symptom, that would change the problem. It doesn't. Because you're not identifying the root, you're identifying a fruit. And if we're not careful, we're trying to teach people how to be fake and how to pretend they have fruit when they don't. Instead of finding out what is keeping people from having fruit. There's a lot of people going through life not having fruit, and they know it, but they're stuck because they don't know how to find the root so that their fruit changes. And that diagnosis right there will help you to determine how to find roots and how to find people's hearts, open people's hearts. And it has to be in that order. If somebody doesn't have hope, they are not going to trust you. If you don't have hope, you're not going to trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all in the alignment with God. We can't just, hope doesn't just come from wishful thinking somewhere. Hope comes from connection to God. Jesus is our hope. That's where we start. If we don't start with Jesus being our hope, we try to put our hope in anything, it's not going to be sustainable. Because if we put our hope in anything except Jesus Christ, we are following symptoms. We are not going to the root. There's a lot of people trying to solve problems as they are following symptoms. That's why if you bring up a story and we start asking questions, we want to know what we're convinced that what somebody tells us first is a symptom. It is not the actual problem. And so if you see people all torn apart or losing it, so to speak, we will always be asking questions, making sure the heart is open, making sure they're connected to God, making sure they even want to connect to God. And it's so subconscious that, and if people think that this is my problem and help me fix it, they get frustrated because they don't want to talk about the real issue. They want to talk about how do I fix my symptoms. Because if you start identifying these things, well, what is actually the problem? Well, the actual problem is usually that as a little child, I was misused when I had the best intentions, and somebody violated that innocence. And since then, I decided that God doesn't know what He's doing, and I don't either. And so I'm going to try to live my life my way, detached from God and detached from others, and somehow this is going to work. And if somebody tries to tell me different, I already put a thing in place, they become the enemy. And so if this is happening in your life, think on these things, because not everybody that is triggering you is the enemy. Not everyone that's asking questions to try to identify a root is the enemy. Why am I teaching?
Because that was your job. Knowing this, we're back in Romans chapter 5, verse 3. And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope, and hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts. Yes? Tribulation is like trials or challenges or things seemingly going wrong in your life or things like that. Okay, so follow this with me. If experience brings hope, and hope maketh not ashamed, so that a person that is hopeless and full of shame would need what? They would need experience, right? And to get experience, they would need patience, and to get patience, they need tribulation. So look at your neighbor and say, do you need more tribulation? Right? Are you following here? Tribulation makes patience, patience makes experience, experience brings hope. Remember, hope is where it starts with how we live our life. Hope makes not ashamed. Are you with me yet? So, but our experience is that most people already have tribulation in their life. Would you agree? You already have tribulation? So what comes before that? What does it say before that? Glory in tribulation. Do you understand that we're not talking about you needing more tribulation? Probably not. What we're talking about is helping you understand how to glory in tribulation. And that was part of the count it all joy part. Count it all joy is another way of saying glory in tribulation. Right? So when you learn how to glory in tribulation, it turns your life around and you start operating the way God designed you to operate, and you start being full of hope. You start trusting God more, and you're able to trust others more, and then you're able to take more personal responsibility. And then you start working in teamwork with other people, and you start leading, and the whole world gets better. Does this make sense? If you can learn how to glory in tribulation, you will overcome the enemy's plans, and he will not be able to control you or manipulate you or just steer you wherever he wants to take you. You start operating in the power of God. You start operating in the anointing of heaven. And you start making changes in this life, not just in your life, but you start affecting the people around you, because people look at you and they're like, what makes you different? Why are you able? See, when everything's going well, you don't really notice that much in people. But when things start going wrong, you start seeing who the people are that have faith and trust God, and who the people are that freak out. Right? I mean, we were on an airplane. Jake and I were on an airplane in Mardin, Turkey, or over, from Istanbul to Mardin, right? Or wherever it was. Flying into Istanbul. Okay. We were flying into Istanbul, and this plane started doing dips and rolls and stuff, just like dropping. It felt like 30 feet drops and stuff, and the wings were flapping. The airplane's wings aren't supposed to be flapping. You know that, right? We were looking out there, and these wings were flapping. And people were screaming and flying out of their seats, and they were saying things they would normally not say in situations. And many of them were calling on God. And you could see where their faith was in that moment. You can see where a person's faith is when things are not going well. Way more so than you can see where their faith is when everything's going well. When everything's going well, people kind of blend together. But when things are not going well, you start seeing who is who. Anybody ever notice that? Right? Even in yourself. You might think you have all kinds of faith, and then all kinds of stuff doesn't go the way you think. It's like, oh! Or am I the only one? Right? So let's learn how to glory in tribulation. Let's learn how to count it all joy. And let's learn how to trust God with all our heart and not lean on our own noggin. That was Steve Lapp version of Proverbs 3:5. What? I said 4 and 5. 4 and 5. Yeah. So, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own noggin. King James says, lean not on your own understanding. Don't go by what your brain thinks when you're having trouble. Okay? Trust God with your heart and override your brain in those moments. Get your heart right, and it will automatically happen. Any questions?